Kearney Central.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to start by commending my colleague from Couva South, who articulated a position on behalf of the workers who are being affected or who will be affected by this legislation and the establishment of the Revenue Authority. But there are many other issues having to do with this authority, which has been long in coming. The member for St. Joseph mentioned that it dates back to 2002. 1993. And 1993, he corrects me now. And the member for Couva South indicated that the minister in the Ministry of Finance now and the member for Diego Martin West and Honorable Prime Minister had positions before that would be very different from supporting the existing bill, although they may have been referring to other versions of the bill. So in 2010, a version of the Revenue Authority bill was brought to Parliament. The then opposition was the UNC, and the UNC voted against it. The Senate at that time also opposed and rejected it. The idea of a revenue authority was embraced, as embraced by the rejected bill, was abandoned by the government at that time. Now, when something like that happens, Madam Speaker, reason calls for a re-examination of the issue and a rethinking of the approach and perhaps a significant revision of the bill. There's no evidence to show that there has been a re-examination of the issue since 2010. There has been some rethinking of the approach because a joint select committee was established to examine the draft bill or the bill that we are looking at now. That bill has been revised, but the foundational issues to which the opposition and some independent senators objected in 2010 have remained. So the philosophical framework which guided the failed bill in 2010 has persisted, and the substance of the bill, notwithstanding stakeholder consultation, which I acknowledge, and opposition objections, which have been frequent, that has not been altered. Something which was initiated since around 2002 has persisted unabated, Madam Speaker, and the influence of those with reservations have been negligible on the bill that we have here before us today. The end result is that we have a JSC report with recommendations that, and I quote from the report which I have here, Parliament agree with its proposal for amendments of the bill, and a further recommendation that, and I quote again from the same document, Parliament consider and adopt the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018 as amended. But we also have side by side a minority report which rejects and repudiates what it describes as, quote again, the irrational approach adopted in the majority report. So a consensus, Madam Speaker, was never reached in the Joint Select Committee. The gap which existed in 2010 could not be bridged 9 years later in 2019. And because this bill violates sections 4 and 5 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and therefore requires a 3/5 majority, it is unlikely to pass. Unless, of course, the government is flexible enough to bridge a gap which separates the two contending positions. But this is not a government which respects the context for flexibility, accommodation, and compromise. In speaking about the local government bill, the Attorney General said that he ensured that the local government bill required a simple majority because he could not count on opposition support. And we have had instances where when the government, amidst objections from the opposition, passed bills with a simple majority, although constitutional rights of citizens were at risk. And we have had one clear case in the instance of the Income Tax Amendment Bill, where the clauses which offended the Constitution and required a 3/5 majority were taken out so that the objections of the opposition could be ignored and the bill passed with a government majority. So it would be interesting to see, Madam Speaker, how the government proceeds today. I do take the Minister of Finance's articulated position that we have a revenue issue, and I do not wish to argue against that challenge given what he described as the depressed oil prices and the depressed gas prices. But I want to say that notwithstanding that issue, we need to look at some other things. And I refer here to the Technical Assistance Report of November 2016. And I simply want to raise a few points from this document. So, Madam Speaker, I refer, first of all, to the views of the private sector. And this is on page 15 of the report. Risk management is not evident, as there is little distinction between those that comply, they're talking about private sector players here, and those that willfully seek to evade their tax or customs obligations. Tax amnesties as a tool to encourage voluntary compliance are not improving compliance, but in fact is working against it. The existing IT platforms in the divisions, that is Gentax and Asicuda, are not being leveraged to take advantage of the substantial investment made. Asicuda, which is not fully implemented with regard to air cargo, suffers from frequent service interruptions that can slow trade. And I will not continue to read this. I just want to make the general point that what the private sector is saying is that the institutions that you have now and the way they operate are not working. And they are not working, and as a result, the efficiency and effectiveness is not there. Now, when you read this further, and I'm going to page 17, the consultants here from the IMF, from the technical report, they confirm that the Revenue Authority is feasible as an immediate priority. This is on page 17. But they suggest certain things, Madam Speaker. They say the authorities need to quickly develop, the authorities in this case is the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The authorities need to quickly develop a plan that would include initial discussions with opposition representatives to ascertain their concerns and priorities. The IMF knows that this is something that would require national cooperation and collaboration. And they suggest a certain methodology beginning with deep consultation with the opposition on this matter, which has not occurred. Secondly, development of proposals based on these discussions and final decision on RA design and confirmed opposition support. Confirmed you had deep consultation with the opposition on this matter? Yes, thank you very much.
Direct your conversation this way. Don't be distracted.
This issue goes beyond a joint select committee process and the handing of a bill with a policy, Madam Speaker. You see? And the members over there are very, if they are being reasonable, they know that they understand what I'm saying. And they are trying simply to convey the fact that I'm saying something that I'm not saying. And what I'm saying clearly is that there was no deep consultation before, prior to the joint select process. And they advise here that you get confirmed opposition support before. Ideas could be developed to garner opposition support. Provision for some involvement of the opposition in the Director General and Board nomination appointment process. And they then advise that such a thing has happened in a country like Mauritius, which they use an example, a country that is a little smaller than us, with a slightly smaller population than us. So I just want to say that they did not even follow the advice here. Very simple. The second thing is, they mention here and advise properly that some aspects of implementation can be sensitive, Madam Speaker. A transformation of this magnitude, that is to say the Revenue Authority, draws attention and concern, and aspects of implementation are more sensitive than others. These can include such things as how and when the DG and board, Director General and board, will be appointed. That is to say, ensuring transparency and fairness. How the first official day of RA operations will be determined. How and when the former divisions will be effectively abolished. How disputes, grievances will be transferred to the oversight of the RA. And most importantly, how the RA will be initially staffed. They have gone through this thing like a bulldozer and gotten to this point, Madam Speaker. All the warnings and cautions and all the consideration of matters of sensitivity where human beings are concerned, where political interests are concerned, and where there is a difference of opinion possibly on policy issues, have been totally ignored by the government. Yes. And they expect us to come here and support this just before they say that the Revenue Authority is a good thing and that it's in 60 countries. Look at this. I go on now to page 20. The consultants go on to say, if the RA proposal does not succeed, change is still needed. In other words, there is no obligation or necessity to take the RA as the only and sole option. The flaws in revenue administration will remain without specific intervention, and this is amply demonstrated by the stasis of recent years. Examples of prevailing problems include, and they go on to include a number of issues. And one of the issues, they said that Ministry of Finance officials are pulled in many directions and as a result are not well positioned to effectively oversee revenue administration, and therefore overall results are unimpressive. They're talking about the existing system. They go on to say in page 22, item 22, page 22, revenue administration reforms do not necessarily depend on the RA model. So they are saying that this is not the only option, which is why they cautioned that you should have deep discussion before to agree on the model. And then they go on to discuss various options here, Madam Speaker, which I will not go into. There are really 4 options, or 3 in addition to the one that has come here. And I have here with me too, Madam Speaker, a final report of the committee appointed by Cabinet to examine the feasibility of establishing a revenue authority in Trinidad and Tobago in August 22nd, 2002. And I want to give the positions of 3 people who were involved in this. The TTMA representatives indicated that a revenue authority should operate as a partnership between the business community and the BIR. And C&E Customs and Excise Division, but that business community involvement in the establishment of a revenue authority should be in an advisory capacity or on a consultancy basis so that the operations of the BIR and customs exercise would remain impartial. So there are 3 issues here. 1, it should be a partnership. You shouldn't be organizing things for the business community in which they are directly affected and they are not partners in the enterprise. Secondly, we recognize the fact that we cannot be involved in the business of operations. We are prepared to play an advisory committee role. And then finally, they are concerned about the impartiality of this institution and about both the institutions, BIR and the Customs and Excise Authority. The TTMA maintained that if a revenue authority fell under the control of a minister or permanent secretary, it would not work, and that a new organization should be designed from bottom up and the staff remunerated. I imagine they meant properly. Then, in terms of the tax practitioners, on May the 7th, the committee met with 2 tax accountants and 1 tax attorney from the major accounting firms in Trinidad and Tobago. Ms. Alison West, PricewaterhouseCoopers at that time, Mr. Peter Inglefield, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Mr. Gregory Hannes, Ernst & Young. Mr. Inglefield began the discussions by making the point that if a revenue authority is going to operate with the same staff under the direction of the government in much the same way as the BIR now operates, the existing remuneration of the employees, and he then pointed to, in other words, he was saying that if they operated in the same way, it wouldn't make any difference. He pointed to the example of the St. Vincent Revenue Authority, which he said devised creative ways to reward their employees. One major problem of the present system was the frustration of competent working staff, competent staff working under incompetent management. So he, Mr. Inglefield, was talking about the structure of the system and how it operated between managerial responsibility and the operational work of workers. Ms. West expressed the fear, this is the current Minister of Finance, Minister in the Ministry of Finance, that the integration of the BIR and the C&E division would produce a cumbersome and inefficient entity. She indicated that improving the efficiencies of both agencies separately should be considered before integration. And Mr. Hannes stated that before there is any integration with BIR and C&E division, there should be complete integration between the BIR and the VAT office. Formation of a revenue authority was not the ideal solution. Rather, improving the present structure would be a better solution since the current BIR has a poor organizational structure. Now, these are the opinions of 3 people. They are not exact. They are not totally critical in every instance, but it gives you reason to pause. It gives you the opportunity, it gives you a situation in which I mean, any reasonable would want to rethink, I mean, are we doing the right thing or would it really work? I mean, shouldn't we approach it a little differently? And I have here the Government of Trinidad and Tobago Ministry of Finance, establishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Policy Framework. Now, I made the point that since 2002, nothing had really changed. And this one starts by saying the Government of Trinidad and Tobago has taken the decision to establish a revenue authority. Now, it will be responsible for the collection of government revenue and the provision of other services for the protection of government revenue, including investigation of tax evasion and carrying out of audits. It then goes on, and I just want to flag a couple of things. Page 2, impact of technology. As a result of the foregoing, tax administration is impacted and requires increasing use and adaptation of technology. The current system in Trinidad and Tobago has failed to leverage technology sufficiently, even with significant investments in technology. Now, this is a very important thing because in the policy paper, it is saying that one of the reasons for the inefficiency and the effectiveness of the system is the failure, first of all, to deploy technology, and secondly, the failure to use the technology in a way that makes the system efficient. Okay? So the technological flaw here is a reason for what you might call the ineffectiveness of the system. So the creation of an authority is not going to solve the problem of technology, Madam Speaker. The second thing that it does here on page 3, he says that the writer of the policy, a trend in revenue administration is to create an agency designed to operate outside of the public service, which is charged by a government to administer all or part of the revenue collection laws. So this is the rationale for the agency. And what they talk about is Trinidad and Tobago will establish a semi-autonomous revenue authority. And they talk about the lessons learned and applied to Trinidad and Tobago, that is to say, what in the policy should apply, a degree of legal and financial autonomy based on the ability and responsibility of the revenue authority to manage its own operation and to be able to respond effectively to changes in the environment, a focus on tax reform and continuous improvement tax administration, strong accountability and performance management through the establishment of a strong reporting, monitoring, and evaluation system. And then they talk about the issue of border control and management, which the Minister of Health spoke about in his presentation. And I want to leave that there because what I want to say now, Madam Speaker, is that the bill before us will not create an independent system. That's the first point I want to make. The bill that is contained in the report as the recommendation to be approved with the entire report is not going to create an independent system. Secondly, it is not going to create an autonomous system. Or if you take the policy and say that semi-autonomous does not mean autonomous and is only half of the autonomy, I think the political, the propensity or the suggestion for political interference makes it not semi-autonomous at all. And it is difficult to see how efficiency and effectiveness will improve. The Minister of Finance asserted that. And the Minister of Health, the member for St. Joseph, asserted that. But there is nothing that has been given as proof or illustration that there will be any improvement at all in the efficiency and effectiveness in the collection of taxes by any of the presentation here today so far. And so I go now to the consolidated bill, Madam Speaker, and I want to make reference to certain things. The authority shall be an agent of the state. This is in part 2, clause 5.2. Then it says, clause 7(2), the board shall be appointed by the minister and shall comprise 9 members as follows. This makes it very clear. By the way, in the policy document, it was said that the board would be appointed by the president. I better get that before they say I'm not telling the truth. This is page 8. It is proposed that the TTRA be managed by a board of directors appointed by the president through instrument of appointment. So they did not follow the policy in that. The minister is appointing. And then further down on that same page, 7(4)(b), the board members other than the permanent secretary and the director general shall be appointed for a term of 3 years. All right, the chairman and vice chairman shall be appointed for 5 years. And so the minister also appoints, well, the permanent secretary, of course, and one of the permanent secretaries in his ministry, and the director general. I mean, there's a level of very direct control there, in addition to the appointment of the board. And then it outlines what they shall do. Then they talk about ministerial direction, etc., not hostile to conformity with the Constitution. So I wouldn't go into that. And then they do have the question of parliamentary scrutiny. I want to acknowledge where the minister brings the names of the appointees to the parliament for confirmation. So, Madam Speaker, what I would say at this point is that when you read the bill itself, it does not exactly conform to the policy that it outlined. And if you disagree with the policy, as we do, then we have a general problem of engaging the legislation at all. And if they had taken the advice of the consultants and deeply consulted with the opposition to establish this prior to any kind of discussion, it was possible that we might have been able to engage a common policy to the establishment of the TTRA. So the Revenue Authority, as proposed by the government and as captured in the bill, in my view, Madam Speaker, and in the view of the entire opposition UNC, is not the best option for Trinidad and Tobago. And this position has been articulated by the leader of the party and the leader of the opposition publicly. Secondly, too much direct power and control is in the hands of the Minister of Finance. We are concerned about that. The issue of political independence and neutrality does arise, and the issue of autonomy and insulation from political interference does arise as well. And these are serious matters because they have to do with taxation matters, and they have to do with intrusive interventions in the conduct of business on our borders, and therefore we have to be concerned about the autonomy, the independence, the checks and balances, the accountability issues in relation to these. There is not enough clarity on the position of workers in the system. I will not go into that, but my colleague from Cuba South has been very articulate and bold on the point. The case has not been made for greater effectiveness and efficiency of this model. That case has not been made. It has been articulated, but it has not been made. And under political direction, an institution such as this can take on a sinister character and be deployed, Madam Speaker, for purposes of intimidation. And therefore, there is reason for caution. You don't have to make a big deal about it. You don't have to howl about it. But any reasonable person would say that some restraint is required, and there is reason for caution on this particular bill. Now, I raised the issue of information technology before, Madam Speaker, it comes up in the policy document prepared by the government to frame the bill that has been brought here today. And I want to say something about information technology. And I'm reading here from the report of the Auditor General
for the
year.
Central, the original speaking time is now expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes. I just want to ask the House, the member will go to maybe, if he takes his 15 minutes, to maybe about 4:34. So would it be agreeable that he completes before we take the suspension? Yes, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. So this is the Auditor General's report of 2018. Of 2017, published in 2018. And in this, on chapter 5, page 71, the Auditor General writes, an information technology IT audit is defined as an examination and review of IT systems and related controls to gain assurance or identify violations of the principles of legality, efficiency, economy, and effectiveness of the IT systems and related controls. An IT audit aims to determine the reliability and relevance of computer-generated information used for the production of financial statements and for decision-making. So, Madam Speaker, when you look at this, you begin to see the issues that are raised here. And the Auditor General asked for reports on their IT condition from the Ministry of Finance, Customs and Excise Division. They got nothing. They asked for the Ministry of Finance Valuation Division. They got nothing. They asked for the Tax Appeal Board. They got nothing. The non-submission, this is the Auditor General writing now, the non-submission of information requested by the Auditor General is in direct contravention of Section 10(1)A of the Exchequer and Audit Act, Chapter 6901. So they are operating in violation of the Act by not responding to the Auditor General. The chances are that things are not as bad as this makes out to be when you make a report like this. There probably was a good reason for them not responding. But the point I'm making is that if you don't have your IT systems right and organized in customs and in the BIR, then no amount of new structure or housing that you create is going to solve any of the niggling problems that attend the issue right now. Now, the responses from the ministries and department, this is to say, they asked the Ministry of Public Administration in conjunction with the Ministry of Planning. The responses from the ministries and departments revealed that there was very little or no integration in the use of IT to facilitate effective delivery. Then they talk about no shared database, this, that, and the other, a set of things. The simple point that I want to make Madam Speaker, is that the two institutions that they are trying to yoke together under this new structure, both of them are very deficient in terms of IT capability, which is absolutely essential for making an efficient system that works and that is more effective. The second thing that I want to say is, I want to look at the 2018 Auditor General's report. And I want to look at the section having to do with accounts of receivers of revenue. And that is chapter 3 of this document. And I want to say, I want to read from here. This is what the Auditor General says on page 29, 3.6. The Ministry of Finance has oversight for Customs and Excise Division and Inland Revenue Division, evidence of an information system to monitor and coordinate revenue collection from receivers of revenue was not seen. They don't have nothing. nothing of substance that you can bring into the picture to account for efficiency and effectiveness. So that if they don't have, no wonder they are described by the Minister of Finance as ineffective. Because the basic information that you need, the basic structures that you need, are just not there. Customs and Excise Division. A number of weaknesses was noted in the application of controls, which can lead to unauthorized access to the system and which may result in the inaccurate recording of revenue and the risk of data becoming compromised. And they want to now tie this in together with inland revenue. This level of efficiency to be tied in now with inland revenue. Then 3.14, there is a lack of segregation of duties in operating Asikuda. Madam Speaker, I don't want to go into how long they've been trying to get Asikuda to run in Trinidad and Tobago under how many administrations, And that includes our administration in the past, includes the one before us. It might have been the one before that, I'm not sure, and including this one. This current government here. The lack of segregation of duties in operating Asikuda in certain areas, such as cashing and examination of containers. The division has reported that this is as a result of inadequate staffing. The organization chart of the IT unit was not provided to enable audit to determine whether the organization structure supported adequate segregation of duties. Officers at all levels have the ability to input, validate, and make certain changes on the system, which can result in unauthorized transactions being processed and possible revenue leakages. I have limited time, and I won't go into this. The only point I'm making on the second report is that the systems clearly, as they are at the present, are in something of a mess. And if you took a messy situation in two institutions and put them together under one roof, the challenge to make them efficient and effective with technology and with systems and with the institutions that have been established but have not been applied properly remain. It is not solved by the problem that it is not solved by the fact that you put them under a single roof and you call them by a new name. Now, what is the problem that we are solving here or trying to solve? We want to collect more revenue. I have no problem with that. We want to be more efficient and effective in the collection of revenue. You want to widen the tax net. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to ensure greater compliance. You want to ensure that a governance arrangement exists that facilitates these arrangements. Now, we do not, Madam Speaker, think that this structure, system, and governance arrangements will achieve the objectives, and this is why. It will create problems with the unions and fear in the heart of workers, and that is happening already. It tries to solve leadership, management, efficiency, effectiveness, productivity, discipline, and corruption issues by dismantling two organizations, the BIR and the Customs Unit of the Ministry of Finance. That is their solution, partial solution to the problem. And then it creates a new unit with recruited hierarchy and transferred workers under different terms and conditions, which create the conditions for problems from inception. From the time you bring in these new cadre, which come under suspicion of the kind that I raised before, and you have the workers now transferred from the public service system, you immediately start with a problem, Madam Speaker. It seems to take a punitive approach to taxation compliance before creating the atmosphere for confidence building through a stakeholder approach and an appeal to nation building and an incentivization of the taxation compliance system. It does this after a punitive approach in taxation generally, and in the absence of a coherent plan for recovery and growth, and in the absence of any clear direction on where the country is headed, the lack of solutions to structural problems in the economy, and the context of a loss of business and consumer confidence which pervades the society. We had taxation increased by 5%. 10% for the banks, a series of other taxes, no rebate on VAT, a number of things like that. You even had a situation in which, for various reasons, nobody knows why, homes were invaded in this country without warrants, and institutions without warrants. Now, in order for something like this to work, Madam Speaker, in order to have an efficient system, the country needs to create an appropriate climate for reform to take place. You need to create the climate before you come with the reform and try to shove it down people's throat. You need, first of all, the restoration of business and consumer confidence by clarity of direction on where Trinidad and Tobago is headed and what sequential steps we are going to take to get there. You need a working partnership for human security, peace, and justice. It may not sound like that, but the crime situation affects the whole atmosphere in things like these. You need a partnership strategy for inclusion and protection of all citizens, a working strategy for increased productivity and competitiveness, a working partnership for economic diversification and structural transformation, a working partnership for innovation-led growth and high value chain technological interventions in the production and investment configuration. And most important of all, you need transparency in the execution and management of government-led projects. Now, the purpose of such approaches and actions is to build a climate of stakeholdership and of cooperation, and so that you can achieve results, and to deepen the process of democracy, collaborative and creative engagement, and trust. Because, Madam Speaker, without trust and a climate of collaboration and cooperation, very little is possible in terms of this kind of institutional intervention and transformation. I end with a quote from a deceased friend called Sil Loha, who wrote these lines sometime in 1970. And he, in the last two lines of his sonnet, said, "Power," and this is what this thing is about, "power is not enough to make us strong. The heart must also sing the human song." Let them try to do that.
Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Orders 53, I beg to move that the debate on the motion be it resolved that this House adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018 be adjourned.
Honourable members, the question is that a debate on the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018 be adjourned. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Members, we shall now take the suspension now. We shall return at 5:10.